What's the fastest you've seen a couple go from married to divorced, and what caused it? Story 1. Some friends who had been dating for a few months got married in Las Vegas as sort of a drunken joke. The girl found out she would lose a lot of her trust fund because of being married. A gaggle of 4 lawyers were flown in and got a very quick retroactive annulment. Marriage lasted 4 days, except legally it was declared to have never existed at all. They dated for 3 more years, then broke up. Story 2. Not sure how long it took the divorce to actually happen, but I went to a wedding where the bride didn't go home with the groom afterwards. There wasn't any cheating. She just decided she didn't want to be a military wife. They were together before he enlisted, so I think part of it was that she wasn't ready to move away from her family. It just sucked that she waited until that day to tell anyone. Answer: she went through with the wedding and then told him she didn't want to be married to him. I have so many questions. Like, she told him after the ceremony or after the reception? Were guests present? Did the guests get their gifts back? Who paid for the wedding? Did she realize it was awful to do? Or was she just like, oh, nah, I changed my mind. Have fun on the honeymoon. Maybe you can bring a friend. Story 3. Next door neighbor got married. Less than 2 months later, she moved out. Said he was abusive and a tipsy. A couple of weeks later, he shot and eliminated their neighbor through the front door after an escalating feud involving the neighbor's dog getting shot with a bow and arrow. Story 4. My cousin and her first husband got divorced after about a month because one of them lived in Houston and the other in Dallas, and they never really agreed how they were going to deal with that. I'm sure there were other things too, but that was the official story. Story 5. I went to a wedding where the bride got tipsy and the groom picked up her phone and saw that she was sexting a coworker during the entire wedding. He told the officiant to not file the paperwork. Great reception, though. Edit. This occurred at the end of the reception as they were leaving to go to the honeymoon suite. The story is she was very tipsy and her phone kept getting notifications, so he picked it up. They did not go on their honeymoon, and they returned the gifts to everyone. The guests weren't told about what happened for a couple weeks as the bride was trying to save the relationship. I was also not privy to the legality of the nuptials not being submitted to the city clerk, so I can't help on that front. Story 6. My friend married this woman after years of dating. They were together about 6 months. Then on their first Christmas, he got her a present and she got him nothing. Later that night, she left their house and didn't come back until the next morning. Apparently, she had made an account on some dating site on Christmas, met a guy, and slept with him that night. She came clean the next day, but that was the end of their 6-month marriage. Story 7. A relative of mine had a marriage last less than 3 weeks. They had been together for a couple years and even went to premarital counseling at their church for a few months to get ready. Their wedding was super lavish, and it was clear a lot of prep and money went into it. At their wedding, they announced they were expecting their first child. Everything seemed great. Unfortunately, the whole thing blew up when the wife discovered he had been cheating on her for almost their entire relationship with multiple women. She found this out while in a foreign country on their honeymoon, 4 months pregnant. I know from her mom that she had complications in her pregnancy that they attribute to the stress of all of this. Story 8. My wife's family's neighbor's daughter got married and threw a huge wedding day bash, like spent 50, 70 grand. Then not even 2 weeks later got divorced. She had been cheating on her husband throughout the engagement, but still wanted her special day. I heard later on that she had asked her mom if she had to live with her husband after they got married. Answer. I know a couple where the exact same thing happened. $50K wedding. She was cheating on him the whole time with his boss, who was married with kids. She only made it 2 weeks into marriage before it blew up in her face. Her dad didn't speak to her for years because he was so angry that she cheated on a great guy. The dad really liked him. With a married man, and let the dad spend $50K on her wedding, knowing that she was living a lie, and then tried to act like the victim afterwards when everyone told her she was an awful person. Story 9. I have a friend who proposed to his girlfriend like a week after he caught her cheating on him. He thought it would bring them closer and fix their relationship. Needless to say, he drove by his house on lunch a few months later and saw her coworker's truck in the driveway. She's getting dicked down into his house and he just drives right by. They are currently getting divorced and after barely a year of marriage. Answer. I can understand his reasoning regardless of how flawed. I spent my 2016 being cheated on by my girlfriend of 3 years. I know there are at least 7 different times across 4 different guys, and I'm sure there is more. I look back and realize I was in an abusive relationship, but back then I truly loved her. and proposed to her in August that year, a day after my 21st, which I skipped so I could afford to take her on a holiday to set the scene. A week later, and she cheated on me again. By the end of September, I stopped loving her, but I became apathetic to what she was doing. The only reason why I wasn't leaving her was that she had spent the entire relationship telling me that if she left me, no one else would want me, and that became a legitimate fear. In December of that year, I found out she ditched hanging out with me around Christmas to go smoke plant substance and get dicked by a dude. I called her and said that she had a day to come get her stuff and that I never wanted to see her again. I have no idea where I got the strength to do that from. I thank God, but finally snapping is just as plausible, especially if you're atheistically inclined. But yeah, being cheated on makes people in love desperate to protect that love, no matter how toxic. Story 10. Had a bit of a tip-off when we didn't see the bride at the reception. She was next door in the carriage house restroom sobbing. She had just found out on her wedding day that her groom had once been engaged to one of her bridesmaids. The groom was not cheating on her, but just never got around to telling her that he and one of their mutual friends had once been an item. The groom spent the reception at the bar. The restaurant staff served the meal, but there was no cake cutting, bridal dance, etc. Story 11. My neighbor got married at 19 and divorced when she was 20. Her parents got divorced while she was dating the guy, and she moved in with him a couple months into the relationship, together less than a year before they got married. Super young couple together for such a short time almost never works out. She didn't learn her lesson, though, because she got engaged to someone else barely a year later. They called it off and broke up before getting married, though. Sadly, that's the happy story of the family, because her younger sister got pregnant at 16 to a guy in his 30s, and then a couple years later got pregnant by him again and married him. He's currently in prison for statutory violation of a 13-year-old. Happened while they were together, but they're still married with 2 children, and she defends him on Facebook all the time. Story 12. One of my friends from college filed for divorce 10 months after her wedding. They were never really a good match, and everyone could see it. Honestly, I think she just wanted to have a wedding and be a princess for a day. Once she realized she actually had to keep the guy, she started having second thoughts. Story 13. Girl I went to HS with has 4 kids from her first marriage. They divorced when they were in their early 40s. She decides she wants to get married again. She wants a religious family man and is convinced Nigeria is the route to go. She starts chatting up Nigerian guys on Facebook. Goes over there, marries a guy she just met via her Facebook husband search. After a few months of her sending money to him after she's home, she's unable to 1 month because she has 4 kids to worry about. He freaks out and they wind up getting it annulled. But wait. There's more. A year later, she's on her way to Nigeria again because she's found another guy to marry. This time she goes over there once to visit, comes home, then basically is, I am not giving you money until we marry. She goes back over again within 6 months to marry him. A month after getting home, she finds out she's pregnant. All is well. Eventually, she's unable to send money because 4 kids with twins on the way, and that comes first. He gets upset and they wind up divorced. She later finds out he'd been chatting up other women around the world and getting money from them, and was only going to use her for a green card to get to the States. I honestly don't feel bad for her. I feel bad for her 6 kids to have to witness their mom make stupid decisions. No idea how the hell she afforded all those plane tickets. She's given up on Nigeria now. Jamaica is on her sights now, so I am pretty sure before long we'll see a shotgun wedding in Jamaica, edited for spelling. Story 14. How about the bride that pushed her new husband off a cliff on day 8? When people noticed he wasn't around, she notified the police. Then when they started searching for him and asking questions, she sent an anonymous email from Joe the plumber from her parents' computer saying he is dead. Then when they still didn't stop investigating, she led a search and rescue party directly to his body. She said God led her to the spot. At the funeral, she seemed relieved, and guests heard her say she was glad that the police didn't have to be involved anymore. Eventually, she made up a story about it being an accident. Finally, she confesses to everything. They hadn't even consummated the marriage. It's a trippy ride, but here's the link. Story 15. I don't know how long it took for them to actually get divorced, but my uncle found out his new wife had been cheating on him right as they left on their honeymoon cruise. His second wife was also a short marriage where she was cheating on him. He's been happily married to his third wife for 5 years or so now, so that's good at least. Story 16. A friend of mine worked for her husband's brother. It's how they met. Once they got married, her boss stopped paying her because she was family now, and you don't have to pay family. So she quit and found another job immediately without consulting her husband. And in a fury, her husband changed all the locks while she was asleep in the back bedroom and put deadbolts on the outside of the door so she could only leave their house if he let her out, and took her cell phone. They didn't have a landline. It took her about 2 hours to get a hold of us online. Dumbass didn't think she could contact people with a laptop, so we called the police, who busted down the door and got her out. Husband went to prison. Her divorce went through real quick, and now, 5 years later, she lives on the coast and got engaged again to a very sweet guy who knows we're all watching like hawks. Story 17. Relative of mine got married and divorced 6 months later. Turns out they had never seriously discussed whether or not they wanted children prior to getting married. One adamantly wanted children and the other didn't, and it drove them apart. They were together for 3 or 4 years before getting married and somehow never figured this out. Answer: yes, this is so important, and make sure they aren't lying. I was 5 months into my first marriage when my spouse told me they had been lying about wanting kids because they knew I wouldn't marry them if I knew the truth. Then they refused to sign divorce papers and told me we had said till passing do we part, while tipsy, high, and brandishing a machete. I was too dumb to know it didn't matter they wouldn't sign papers and too scared to try to leave, so it ended up lasting 8 years. Story 18. Wedding photographer here. Over 5 years, I know of 3 couples that are no longer together. One couple married in September, divorced by February. One couple had been high school sweethearts, waited 10 years to get married, and the marriage, from what I can see, lasted less than a year. The other couple, the groom was tipsy for the whole wedding, felt up his mother, and they used to post their photos all over FB and IG. Now they're no longer to be seen, and the status of married is gone. Story 19. My boyfriend's cousin. She's 21, dating a 19-year-old who looks 12 and is tiny. She's a very large woman. She's extremely physically abusive. I watched her pick this man up and lock him in the trunk of a car by sitting on top of it to induce a panic attack and win their argument at work. He always has bruises and black eyes. He proposes to her after a few months of dating. They get married. He annuls the marriage and leaves in secret the next day. Goes into hiding for 6 months. She posts lots of woe is me sappy breakup stuff. Somehow out of nowhere, he's just back. They remarry at the courthouse, and now she's saying she's pregnant but not telling her family. Her husband looks miserable and, according to the grapevine, doesn't work anymore and is confined to the apartment they share. Whether that's by choice or not is up for debate. The poor guy looks like a withered husk of himself, and he's only 19. Edit: for everyone saying we are awful people for not helping the guy, are you insane? Of course we've reached out, confronted the wife, begged the husband to leave, called the cops, given him shelters and resource information. He is over 18 years of age. Calling the cops does nothing because he lies to them. They can't arrest his abuser just because I said there was a crime going on. He has to admit he's in danger and wants to press charges or wants help in leaving. He won't do that. Our hands are legally tied. Until he's ready to seek help, all of us are keeping an eye out. And no, the cops aren't doing nothing because he's a man. Cops do this to women too. If you are a woman and I call the cops saying you are being abused and you tell them you are not being abused, the cops will also do nothing because the victim of the crime is denying the crime occurred. Story 20. Well, it wasn't really a divorce. My brother married his girlfriend in Japan, Cinderella wedding at Disneyland and everything. Turns out she decided she was going to stay in Japan, despite them planning to move to Canada with him. Later, he found out she never submitted the paperwork, so they were never married. Story 21. A friend of mine was divorced and remarried in the same month. We all thought it was a little quick, but turns out they had been hot for each other for years. Anyway, a couple months after she got married, I saw her Facebook status change to separated. Don't know if they're still married or not. Story 22. About 30 minutes. Bride told the groom in the run-up to the wedding, "Do not smash the cake in my face. Do not." His buddies all got on him about being a private area and showing her who's really in charge of this marriage. I was at the wedding. He smashed the cake in her face. She walked out of the reception and had it annulled. Story 23. Young couple in their late 20s. Bride was the daughter of a friend. Daughter never learned to budget, save, spend wisely, pay bills on time, prioritize. They both worked full-time at good jobs in San Francisco and lived in Pacific Heights in a purchased condo that was quite nice. She took them both into a ton of debt, had to have the very latest of everything that was material in nature, clothing, furniture, etc. She would put $1,000 on their credit card in an hour on absolutely nothing. She nagged her husband, and from the moment he walked in the door from work, even in front of company. It lasted 2 years. He couldn't get away fast enough. Her wedding photos were hilarious. No smiles. Story 24. They were able to get the little one breathing, but he had no brain activity and they had to pull the plug. The marriage ended pretty much immediately. Story 25. When I was in the Army, my ex-wife and I were good friends with a couple that lived a few doors down from us. One day I get home from work, and he's sitting on his front doorstep. I said, "Hey." He said, "Dude, you got to come see this." So I walked into his house, and it's empty. Completely. Not a scrap of paper, not a bag of trash. The weird thing was, every cabinet door was open, refrigerator door open, every drawer open. If it was supposed to be closed, it was open. He said the front door was wide open when he got home, and every faucet was turned on too. No note, nothing. His wife was just gone with everything in the house. The thing was, my ex-wife and I had dinner with them in their house the night before, laughing it up, drinking wine, having a great time. No sign of a thing wrong. He said the first thing he did was call her parents' house, and her father answered the phone. Before he could even ask if he knew what was going on, the father said, "Bill, you need to let it go," and hung up. Remember that line from True Lies when Tom Arnold says his ex-wife even took the ice cube trays? Well, she took the ice cube trays. Also took all of his uniforms and other clothes. He literally had the clothes on his back and what was in his pockets to his name. I never did find out what the motivator was. She was just gone. Answer: nearly the same thing happened to a good friend of mine while we were deployed for Desert Shield Storm. We came home from deployment and had this big release formation. His wife wasn't there, no way to get home, so I convinced the motor pool Sajid to let me get my car to drive him home. The whole way he's making excuses. She must be arranging a big party with the kids. Maybe the car broke down, etc. We get to his place and he opens the door to a 90-995 empty home. The only thing left was one end table, a lamp, a chair, and 2 stacks of paperwork. The first was all the bills that were never paid 1 month after we deployed, and a stack of receipts from the pawn shop where she sold everything they ever owned, including the car. Needless to say, the bank account was deep into NSF territory as well, so he had no way to do anything. Me and another friend bought back as much of his stuff as we could. We also found out she ran off with some local yokel down to Florida with the kids. I ETS'd out soon after coming back to the world, so I don't quite know how it all turned out in the end. I hope things worked out for you, Johnny C., you pumpkin-headed freak. Story 26. My own marriage in 2004. Kissed my wife goodbye for a 3-month deployment to Pakistan in March. I never saw her again. After 2 months of being there, she told me she wanted to leave me. At the time, there was a loophole in divorce law. One website was exploding, QuickSimpleDivorce.com. Lawyers in Guam were allowed to process uncontested divorces pretty quickly. Paid $800 and sent her the paperwork. We were living in Germany at the time, and she signed and left for the U.S. before I got home. The divorce was finalized in August of 2004. What caused it? Don't know really. Honestly, she was unhappy prior to my departure. We had only been married a couple years. We kind of rushed to get married in 2002 when I got orders to Germany. Story 27. Worked at a wedding venue, and the bride told the groom, who was from Arkansas, that there was to be no call of the hogs during the wedding speech. Groomsman proceeds to do it anyway, and the bride was furious and went into the back with the bridal party. Dude slapped her and said this shoot is getting annulled tomorrow. Honestly, she might have not dodged the slap, but she dodged a bullet. Story 28. One of my classmates in HS married her boyfriend before graduating college. She was one of those girls that had her entire life planned, so we were a little surprised that she didn't wait to graduate, but he was just about perfect, so it made sense. He was intelligent, motivated, sweet, etc. He would come over to her house on weekends and mow her grass, do little repair jobs, take out the trash. Perfect courtship, beautiful proposal, a wedding that everyone talked about for weeks. 6 months later, we go out for a girls' night, and we beg for details on her wedded bliss, seeing as she's the first one married and she breaks down. He had just stopped. Everything he had done before marriage just disappeared. It was like he was done adulting and reverted back to childhood. Wouldn't eat anything but spaghetti and chicken nuggets, literally. Started skipping class, cut his hours at work to less than half, didn't do any housework, any yard work, would spend the entire night up with his best friend playing video games, to the point the friend complained. Drama intensified, and they were divorced before they hit their 1-year anniversary. Story 29. The actual divorce has to wait because of visa issues, but basically they got married, everything was fine, and then about a month later, she got weirdly quiet about their relationships. And about 9 months after the wedding, he told her he thinks of her like a sister. Holiday romance, long distance for several years, a fuck ton of red flags, and the second they moved in together, things went to hell. Basically, he didn't do shoot around the home. She earned all the money and paid for all of his stuff on top of it. He then squandered her money even when she asked him not to. She actually had to put a limit on his phone contract. I don't think he planned to leech on her. He's just an inconsiderate jerk. They're waiting it out because she's too nice to send him back. Story 30. Good friend of mine got married. On their honeymoon, husband tells her he needs space and isn't sure what he wants. Then he tells her he's leaving her for her best friend, who he's having an affair with. My friend is now blissfully happy and thriving, and he's still a piece of garbage. Story 31. My boyfriend of on and off for 6 years started cheating on me with this girl in Texas. We lived in California. We broke up due to the cheating. A month or so later, the girl moved in with him. They got married on my birthday. Divorced 2 months later because they were both abusive to each other and she was cheating on him with his best friend. Sometimes karma is just so real. Story 32. 6 months. Both bride and groom were good friends of mine. Had the wedding at the most expensive yacht clubs in my state. Full Vera Wang tuxedos for all the groomsmen bought for us, not rented. Had the wedding on July 4th weekend, didn't last until the end of January. Story 33. I knew a couple that did the whole, I don't know if I can make a commitment like getting married to you, but having 2 kids with you is NBD deal, and after a couple years of it, they tie the knot. A couple months later, her FB status is single. He was a massage therapist and had 3 girls on the side that he was meeting for their night massages because she works all day and can't come in then. Story 34. A month. A close family friend got married in August. They had been dating for 4 years and engaged for a year and a half. She found out in September that he was active on dating apps, and she found out because he had tried to hit up her coworker, who of course immediately told her, on an app. I was even in the wedding and had no idea he was up to anything. Story 35. My friend married a dude after knowing him for 3 months and started to divorce him 3 months later. She had baby rabies and married a guy who had kids because she thought that meant he would want more. He was okay with more kids, but he was a bit of a deadbeat. He didn't want to see his cods and never tried to make time for them and fought against paying support for them because he was supposed to have shared custody but never took the kids. My friend realized this was not a person to have a baby with and left him. She found a great guy almost immediately and they've been together for over a year. She's not rushing now. Story 36. Best man at my wedding was driving to his honeymoon with his new bride when she told him, I don't think I want kids. This was after being together for years and claiming that she did want kids. Then as they pulled into a gas station, she told him, I don't think I want to be married. X200B. He almost left her at the gas station. X200B. After they got back from their honeymoon, she would stay out until 4 a.m. just about every night. No calls or texts, just wasn't coming home until very late. X200B, they were divorced within 6 months of the wedding. X200B, my wedding was not too long after his divorce was finalized. I told him very clearly that he was allowed to give a rambling Mosby-esque speech about how love was fudge. He gave a very nice, funny speech instead. Story 37. I got married in May of 2008. Several other people in my life got married that year. My marriage is the only one that lasted. One friend of mine got married 3 weeks before I did. They were separated within months, though not officially divorced for a little over a year. My dad got remarried a month after my wedding. Same as my friend, effectively divorced almost immediately, legally divorced sometime later. Another friend of mine got married that fall. He stayed married the longest of them. I think that one lasted 5 years. A friend of my wife got married that December. She was cheating within months, not sure how long until they were actually divorced. Story 38. Tried my best to talk my friend out of marrying a total loser. I was her bridesmaid and best friend. It was my duty. When she wouldn't listen, I called her parents. I reached out to her sisters. They all knew it was true and agreed with me, but none of them would back me up, and she went through with it and married him. Unfortunately, we stopped speaking shortly after her wedding, but I had heard that they split before making it to their 1-year anniversary. She lost half of everything, including her house that she bought and owned way before he came along. It's strange cause you'd think I'd feel vindicated, but it just makes me feel worse. Story 39. Me and my ex-wife. 7 months of total time married before the divorce papers were signed by the judge. X200B, turned out she had been cheating on me the whole engagement and the year and a half of our relationship before that. I just happened to luck into finding out because she said she was staying the night with her sister, but her sister called me to talk to her. Turns out she was staying the night at a Boy Toys. Story 40. Literally 2 days. A guy held a wedding on 31/12 and one of his friends got really partied too hard and got into some trouble with the Norwegian police. The guy went to take him out of jail instead of going to his new wife. He came home early in the morning. A scandal followed, which resulted in a few, according to him, slaps on her face. Since 0101 was a holiday, she filed for divorce on the 2nd. Story 41. I knew a couple who had been on again, off again for years. They broke up several times during their engagement, yet still went forward with the wedding. Once they said their I do's, she suddenly seemed to think that she should be completely in control of his life and started making demands about which friends he was allowed to spend time with and accused him of cheating if he spoke to one particular friend. They filed for divorce about 2 months after the wedding, and she moved in with a boyfriend she had been seeing on the side for a few months. Story 42. Guy I knew from work. He was a manager of mine, really nice guy who went through a shoot divorce when he was my manager. He transferred and worked for my friend and met a girl in a different store. They seemed like a perfect match, and I was really happy for him when I found out he'd proposed. Went to the wedding in July and found out from my friend the girl came home 6 weeks later and said she didn't love him. Turns out she was cheating on him with a woman for a while. I feel really bad for him. He's a nice guy, and IDK why he's so unlucky. Story 43. Side girl was there. Groom was apparently talking to her, so the bride left the reception. From there, she went back to their place, took his gun, and went to a hotel and eliminated herself. Really, really awful. Bride and groom both worked on our military base at the time. Story 44. Without going into details, someone called our office. Call came to me as our normal family law lawyer was in court. I asked what was going on. Them. We had a huge fight before we got married, and now we've decided it's not going to work. Can we just undo the marriage? Me. When did this happen? Them. 15 minutes ago. I explained that no, they can't just undo the marriage. They need a divorce. Told them to call back after the weekend, and we'll see what we can do. Didn't hear back from them. Story 45. I filed for divorce 6 months after I got married. We had been together for 2 years before we even tied the knot. He decided since we were married and lived together that date nights were no longer necessary since he saw me every day. So he would spend all weekend, every weekend, with his friends. I was also ill when we first got together and underweight because of it. I put on a little weight and was healthy. He told me he wasn't as attracted now that I had gained weight. I was a 145 Fuaros at 5'7", X200B, a nope the fudge out of there. I try to think back and remember any red flags, but he truly turned into a different person after I was legally bound to him. Story 46. Both of mine are stories from my wife's family. Cousin got married and divorced within 3 weeks. He was the side guy, and she ended up deciding the marriage to get back at her cop boyfriend was a mistake. They'd been dating for a few years before getting married. It's uncle that had his new wife walk out on him after a few months. She'd been seeing someone else the entire relationship and decided she wanted to marry him instead. Oddly enough, also a cop. Story 47. 2 months. My ex-wife cheated 2 months after we were married. At least that's all I know about. She also mistreated my son when I wasn't home. She was a real meanie. Glad I got away from that. She got married again shortly after. I know how to pick 'em. Story 48. Divorced my husband after 2 months. My younger brother, now 8-yo, was taken by Children's Aid, and my ex-husband wouldn't let the kid come live with us. I was taken by them as a child and relived the trauma when he was apprehended and ex didn't care. Huge red flag. Younger brother now lives with me and my current boyfriend after being taken by CAS a second time. Story 49. Friend of my wife got married, and 6 months in, she didn't think things were going well. She went to him and told him as much and said if he wanted to divorce her, he could. She was trying to reverse psychology him and hoped that her saying he could leave would scare him and work on the marriage. Needless to say, he saw the out and chance to start seeing others and took it. Story 50. My male cousin couldn't land a full-time teaching job out of college, so he had to substitute for a while. Ends up while college girls didn't give him a second look, those cougars teaching second grade thought he was hot stuff. Anyways, he wet his beak one too many times, and when his wife found out about all his trysts, that was the end of the marriage. Story 51. I worked with a guy who was at his wife's exceptionally conservative family's reunion. As they were all seated around an enormous table, their 4-year-old took his straw from his drink, stuck it in his nose, and ran the other end along the table. "Johnny, what on earth are you doing?" "I'm being daddy." He said, "You've never seen a divorce happen faster." Story 52. Used to do a weekly movie game night with 2 straight couples, plus me and my partner. Both couples had kids and seemed perfectly content with each other. One night while we were having dinner before the movie, the wife of the first couple got up to go to the restroom and left her phone unlocked on the table. At some point, the conversation topic turns to something cute their kid did that day, and the husband picks up his wife's phone and opens the photo app to show us the video. The phone is full of dozens of male body part pics and full body private pictures of the husband of the second couple. Shocked and not knowing what to do, The first husband simply turns the phone around and shows the whole table just as his wife returns from the restroom. There is a very long silence as everyone stares and mentally puts it together. Then the other couple's wife quietly stands up and says they need to go, right now. No more words were said or exchanged beyond a few mumbles. My partner and I also left as quickly as possible. Both couples were separated within a few days and divorced shortly thereafter. The two star-crossed lovers briefly dated for real and then also blew up for unspecified reasons a few months later. Story 53. Only including people that I've actually met and not just heard of. My cousin got divorced about 3 years after the wedding. They had just bought their first house together about a month before the divorce. Based on her previous history, I think my cousin has a fear of commitment, and owning a house felt like a bigger commitment to her than getting married. Story 54. Not sure how true this is, but apparently my great-grandparents were married for a month. He got her pregnant, and since this was the 1920s, they sort of kind of had a shotgun wedding. Then almost right away, he would up in jail. Dude was part of the Chicago Mafia. She turned around and filed for a divorce soon after, but before it was finalized, he was gunned down. Story 55. Relative of mine got engaged. She had a 9-year-old child from a previous relationship, and her new fiancé got along great with the kid, and he was all for being this kid's stepdad, so everything seemed good. They got married, and the day after the wedding, he sat her down and told her he wanted her to send the kid away because he wanted to start his own family and didn't want to raise her kid from a previous relationship. He asked her to choose between him and her kid. She annulled the marriage that same day, and they went their separate ways. Story 56. For days, friends of mine had been together for 15 years. They seemed to have a normal, healthy relationship, including ups and downs, but nothing to indicate they were close to breaking up. As many of you will know, a long-term relationship can replace initial lust and excitement with mundane day-to-day survival and petrol station flowers for Valentine's. Maybe not, and I suspect they felt getting married would be a jump start for their aged relationship. We went to the wedding on Friday. Everyone was really happy. Then early the next week, they annulled it and broke up. They were very matter-of-fact about it, and neither party were devastated. To be fair, I think everyone else was more hurt. Story 57. My husband's aunt's marriage lasted about 1.5 years. I'm honestly surprised it lasted that long. She cheated on him multiple times before they were even married, including with her first cousin. Her family told him about it, and her dad actually took him aside the day before the wedding and told him not to go through with it, but he did anyway. And crazily enough, she's the one who left him. I figure he likes the idea of a trophy wife because she's about 20 years his junior. Poor guy is still hung up on her. Story 58. They had like $100,000 wedding at a beach resort, which was attended by close family and a few friends, then had an expensive reception at home with everyone else. They lasted about 1 year, had a kid, then the groom begins a heroin addiction, prompting an immediate divorce. An ex-girlfriend of mine was divorcing her husband, who she married at 17. I didn't know about this until a few weeks into the relationship. She was 19 at the time. Then after I broke up with her, she started dating some dude in his 30s. He got her pregnant, and they eloped. 7-9 months into that marriage, 1 to 3 months after the birth of her baby, she divorces her husband for another guy and gives him primary custody so she can go out and party. Story 59. One of my family members, actually, didn't even last 6 months. In my perspective, they were doomed from the start. The wife is very needy and high maintenance, while the husband is very cold and unemotional. After the wife got some more attention from other guys. After losing some weight, she realized that some men are willing to make an effort for her needy, high-maintenance self, so she jumped ship. There was a plethora of other issues within that marriage, and I believe both sides will be better off split. But still, the length of a Hollywood wedding ain't always good. Story 60. Grandpa married his high school sweetheart in 1949. He went to Korea, and the entire war he stayed faithful to her, even when his comrades spent their ration cigarettes on local hookers. He wrote to her every day, talking about the war, and when she wrote back, she claimed everything was fine and dandy, even though she missed him. He fought through the entire war, and in 1954, he was honorably discharged and sent back to his home in Idaho. She had 3 children and 1 more on the way, and never said anything about it to him. They were 100, not his, even though she insisted they were right up until the very end. They were in the courthouse the week after he came home, and the judge, who, because this was a small town, was his best friend's father, said that it was the only time he could think of where he was glad to send away a divorced, pregnant mother of 3 without any alimony whatsoever. Story 61. My cousin was married to her high school sweetheart for 2 months before their divorce happened. He was an Army Ranger and lived on base while she still lived home finishing college. Every couple of weeks, she would spend a weekend with him at his apartment. One day, she decides to surprise him by showing up a day early. When she gets there, she couldn't find any of their pictures together. None of the cute notes they put on the fridge. Even her clothes she left there in the drawers were missing. So she waits all night for her husband to come home, and when he does, he's got a tipsy girl with him. Pretty obvious what was happening, so she left and drove home without saying a word and filed for divorce. Story 62. 8 months from wedding to separation, another 4 to the divorce being finalized. They had been engaged and living together for 5 years, married in August, bought a house in December, mostly because he was really pushing for it, moved in, and immediately started referring to the empty bedroom as the nursery. She wasn't ready for a kid, but figured they'd get there eventually. Then some pretty big differences in their expectations came to the surface. He expected her to become a stay-at-home mom soon. She expected to continue building her career. He expected to have financial control over the household, and even lied to her about their bills. She expected to be an active partner in their financial future. By March, she cheated on him, then moved out of the house. The paperwork for their divorce was finalized before what would have been their first wedding anniversary. She and the guy she cheated with got together immediately and eventually bought a house together. A few years after that, they got married. She's a great stepmother for his kids and has been able to build her career. She's even working on a master's now. She and her ex were both assholes, but he was worse. They're both better off separate. Story 63. My friend had 3 weddings to the same dude. A voodoo wedding in his mom's trailer in New Orleans, a court wedding, then a Catholic ceremony, all within a year of knowing each other. Within a year, she was going home with different guys from the bar she worked at, and DFCS was called when he left her kid home alone so he could drink too. Ah, Louisiana. Ah, alcoholism. Story 64. My first marriage was 5 months, had to wait 90 days, so pretty much 2 months. She had a plan, she told my roommate at the time. She was going to marry me buy a house, divorce me, then keep the house. Meanwhile, she had no job. 1 week after the divorce was finalized, she got a cell phone in my name and the bills sent to a different address. When trying to prove it wasn't me for fraud, the apartments where she was living, they were looking for her too for unpaid rent. I dodged a major bullet. I was 21 years old. Been downhill since with the luck. Story 65. I think it was about 3 weeks. They only knew each other for a couple months, and it was a disaster from the get-go. But the final straw was when she went out without telling him and won a contest at a bar. It was a who can get the most beads from guys type thing, and she won by showing everyone in the bar her boobs. She came home at like 1 a.m., told him about it, and he divorced her. Story 66. My high school friends got married at a few years out of high school. She was banging someone else while he was stationed across the country in the military. All the bridesmaids knew for a year before they got married, but for some reason only thought to tell him 3 months after the wedding. She was a good girl in high school too, and we were all a part of the same friends group. I would have never guessed she would do that to him. No one talks about it still. Story 67. I was married at 18 for exactly 10 days before going through a divorce. We had dated for 3 months prior to that. Basically, about 3 days before we were married, he decided it was a good time to steal his roommate's identity and credit cards. So all of a sudden, I have a really nice wedding ring. He's got a Camaro. We are looking at houses to buy. He is decking me out in nice clothes. And then we go out partying every night and get a hotel to crash at. It's an 18-year-old sheltered girl's dream until things don't start adding up. Until he starts sending you to the car while he pays for everything, until you start to hear someone call him by a different name in a bar, but it was loud, so maybe you misheard. Until he starts getting more sketched out every single night, until you are bouncing between multiple hotels and bars every night. And then there is a run-in at a hotel with the owner screaming and freaking out and threatening to call the cops. He says, no big deal. The dude is just crazy. We will go out partying, and you do. And when you leave, the cops chase you for hours, and you keep asking for answers, and you never get any until finally it's 4 a.m., and you are on the beach and so tired, and cops surround the car and cuff you and ask what you know about your husband and his identity theft. Story 68. High school friend, kind of a loser by his own perception, somehow got to date this extraordinarily beautiful girl, dated for 5 years, then got married. He was like 24 or 25. She was a few years younger. Half a year later, she looked very pregnant, and they were divorcing. Right before the birth, she got married again to the baby's father, who was her mistress. Is that a word for a guy? For the whole time she had been with my friend, never understood why she married my friend in the first place. Story 69. A month after getting married, he found out she had been cheating on him, not sure for how long, but I believe a couple of months, with a guy she worked with. Not only that, but the reception for their wedding was held at her job. So yeah, the quickest marriage I've seen was about a month. Story 70. Not actually married, but my ex and I went from engaged to broken up within 4 months. He had severe mental health issues, and I thought making a commitment like an engagement would help to show him that I was serious about sticking with him through that. Unfortunately, the more committed our relationship got, the worse his condition got, and it was a pattern I hadn't picked up on until then. It quickly became a situation where his mental health issues were causing me mental health issues, and the relationship became a toxic mess for all parties involved. I regretted my decision not even 2 months later, but it took a little bit longer to actually pull the trigger and call it off. Story 71. Best friend got married. 2 weeks later, they took separate vacations. 8 months later, the divorce was complete and legal. Done. When they met, she was a little on the heavier side. As they dated, she lost weight and started getting attention from men. We saw the cracks during the lead up to the wedding and even had a discussion with the groom after the rehearsal dinner, but they went through with it anyway. I think she was also infatuated with the idea of a big fairy tale wedding, but after it was over, she realized she didn't want to be married. My friend ended up marrying a woman who could have been his ex's sister, looked just like her. That marriage survived 2 years. Story 72. About 3 hours. Okay, that isn't technically true, but here it goes. 2 years after graduating high school, a friend of mine in the Marines is set to deploy overseas, and he decides to marry the girl he has been dating since our junior year of high school. He proposed on a Monday, and the next day they got married at a courthouse, then told everyone they were engaged and set the date for a month later. It wasn't a big wedding or an expensive one, so it wasn't hard to put together on short notice. I was invited along with a few other friends from school and a bunch of other Marines I'd never met. The wedding was nice and only about an hour long, then another hour and a half for pictures and food. It was a very pleasant, sweet little wedding. Shortly after the wedding, the couple checked into a motel for their honeymoon, and the new wife spilled the beans that she was pregnant and hubby might not be the dad. Apparently, she was eager to get married quick because she thought it meant Brian wouldn't then leave her. When he found out, she was wrong. He immediately began paperwork for an annulment, and though it took forever to happen, things worked out in his favor. Story 73. My mom's church friend was really into black guys and also super Christian. She ended up meeting this guy in Toronto, and they've been talking for a few months IG. She ended up moving across Canada to be with him. They get married 3 days after she gets there, and then not even a week later, they divorce. She packs up and moves back. My mom picked her up from the airport. She asked what happened, and I heard her tell my mom that he was very controlling, and she whispered, "I didn't know it would look like that." X200B, they lasted less than a week. Story 74. Seriously, less than a week. The wife was unaware of the husband's methamphetamine addiction. Apparently, it was discovered within a few days following their wedding. He confessed to using almost daily into a fair amount of fudge around because he didn't know how to tell her he didn't want to get married. She threw him out and either got a divorce or had the marriage annulled. I don't remember which. Story 75. Same intimacy. Wedding, I'm good friends with one guy, and though I attended the wedding, I knew there were so many problems in the relationship. I didn't think it would last, but they were so invested in the wedding, more so than in each other probably, that I don't think they ever questioned that the wedding would happen. His family all came from overseas, etc. 9 months later, they were not a couple. Story 76. My grandma's cousin was married for 2 weeks. He's always been a bit eccentric. He went to high school with her, then left for a different part of the country. He then became a successful businessman and made quite a bit of money. Met up with her for the first time in 40 years, and she fell in love at first sight, or second sight, 2 weeks after he proposes. A few weeks later, they get married. 2 weeks later, she files for divorce and takes him to court in an effort to get 12 his money. She wasn't successful, but didn't exactly fail. Rumor in the family is that she gets a few thousand a month. Hearing my grandma tell the story is heartbreaking. He's an odd guy, but does a ton for the less fortunate. He's built schools and shelters in South America and does a ton for the communities down there. Now there's some hoe in Illinois taking money that used to help the less fortunate. Story 77. My cousin's marriage lasted 2 months. They had been dating a few years, and my cousin wanted to get married, but he just wouldn't commit. So anyway, she gets pregnant. She told him they needed to get married before their baby came. So he agreed. So with full baby bump in the wedding photos, the wedding happened. The baby came. And the husband was clearly not the father, so he left and filed for divorce, and none of us ever heard from him again. My cousin is astoundingly good at fudge up her own life, so not really surprised by this one. Just disappointed. Story 78. A friend married her high school sweetheart in her early 20s. She had started to get really pushy about him proposing, and he eventually did. And they had a lovely wedding. In less than 6 months, they were divorced. She told us that despite being together for 8 years, she only just learned that he wasn't a good enough Christian, and she couldn't imagine raising her future children with him. She decided the man she was having an affair with was a better man of God. She ended up married to the other man after about a year, but they seemed to be going well. Story 79. I went on a few dates with a girl I met on Tinder. On our first meeting, she confessed that she was married, pending the statutory waiting period for getting a divorce. Apparently, within the last year, she had gotten heavily pressured by her college boyfriend from a foreign country to get married. It was also apparently heavily expected that she move to his homeland with him. It then became apparent that they were supposed to live with his family, who dislike her for not being the same nationality. She fled the country back to her hometown to wait until she could serve him with divorce. From what it seemed, she was way on board to get a lot of dude attention from Tinder. Story 80. My brother secretly got married to another guy. No one in our family knew he was gay, and some of our family are incredibly homophobic and assholey, and maybe a year later are now getting divorced because his husband cheated. I feel so bad for him, but now if he ever decides to remarry, at least we can all be there to celebrate with him. I hope he finds someone as great as him. He deserves it. Story 81. We know a super good dude, one of those incredibly handy, always there to help out, never says a bad thing about anyone, who was closing in on retiring from his job as a contractor and was riding towards that pension. We also have a scummy acquaintance who is slightly older than him, twice divorced, and when they met up, it was immediately clear that he was going to try and fix her and her fam. Not in the obnoxious kind of pushy way, but because the poor guy is the reluctant hero of every story. They were probably together, maybe 2 years. Moment he finished his retirement party, she gave him papers. Crazy thing is that he was such a good father to her, mostly. Grown daughters that one of them got married and chose him to walk her down the aisle. Dude didn't deserve that treatment, but in the end, the crazy probably would have been too strong for him anyway. Story 82. My mother met a guy who was on holiday. They started seeing each other sort of every other weekend. After 3 months, they got engaged. The whole family told her she was being ridiculous, but she wouldn't listen. 6 months after the engagement was the wedding. Her new husband still lived in another country, and the most time they had spent together was maybe 3 consecutive days. The amount of their relationship they were actually together would be about a month or 2. After the wedding, it was another 3 months before he moved to live with her. Within 6 months, he had moved out, and they were divorced not long after. Whole relationship, marriage included, was no more than 18 months. And this is why you never marry someone you've never lived with, kids. Your whole relationship changes once you cohabit. Story 83. My second husband changed completely after we got married. He made lots of effort in the relationship before we were married, but as soon as he'd got me, things changed. Why would I spend 10p to text you during the day when he'll see you at home tonight? But the biggest was that we had agreed I would continue full-time and he would go part-time. He was also at part-time night school to fit in with the childcare after the birth of our daughter. We had also agreed to look for a bigger house after the baby was born. About 3 months in, he got tired of this setup and wanted to go back full-time work, gave up night classes, and left me literally holding the baby. I had no option but to give up my job and take something with more child-friendly hours, which meant we couldn't afford a bigger home as I earned more. Everything we agreed together as a family when pregnant and planning the marriage he went back on. He was the one that pushed for the baby. I agreed on the basis that he would be primary caregiver. He changed his mind. He broke all his promises and set my career back 10 years while I brought up my daughter single-handed. I'm a nurse. I couldn't do it without childcare for my shift pattern, and he knew it. He used to not turn up to pick up the baby, and I would have to phone in sick. Some men complain that their ex don't let them have the kids. I didn't need maintenance money. I needed my child looked after so I could work. Ended up with neither. Oh God, that turned into a rant. We are good, now remarried to a good man, kid almost grown, and nursing full-time again. Story 84. My mom married this dude from Morocco, had a Muslim wedding, the works. I loved my white girl hijab. I digress. He went to visit his family, wife, back home and lost his passport. He never came back to the U.S. My mom became pregnant, Muslim, no longer Muslim, annulled marriage all within 4 months or something like that. Guess you could call her a hopeless romantic. Answer, my mom's ex-boyfriend, the only guy she dated after splitting up with my dad in '94, had been living with her for a year, was a huge part of our lives. My bro and I were both in university, but I'd gotten to be very close with the boyfriend, and everyone loved him. Summer of '89, he went away for a week to care for a sick family member in another state. A few days later, she got a letter in the mail saying he was never coming back, and he'd gotten married to an old friend. She's never dated since. Our poor moms. Story 85. I can't count how many tourists I've met that got married at City Hall after getting tipsy. Then I had to tell them they had to go back to their home country for their divorce, as there's residency requirements within the state to obtain a divorce. Story 86. My ex lived with his girlfriend for 19 years before he married her. They were married around 9 months when he forgot to log out of Facebook. You know what happened next? They divorced, but it's been 6 years and they still live together, go everywhere together, and act married. They are both seeing other people and swear they are only living together because neither can afford to live on their own. It's weird, because they swear to the 2 kids we had together that they can't stand each other. I mean, he choked her out, went to jail for it, then they showed up 2 days later together for a going-away party at my home for our kid when he moved out of state. So weird. Story 87. My brother was married to someone for 6 weeks. They had dated before. She was a meanie. He complained about her constantly, and her child was a complete brat. She was abusive to his daughter, abusive to him, abusive to her kids. She worked at the same hospital as my mom and went up to my mom while she was with a patient and tried to fight her. While they were married, she was the definition of a narcissistic meanie, and honestly, I hope she dies. Story 88. I had a lesbian coworker that married her girlfriend after knowing her for 4 months. Her girlfriend had her own apartment that paid cheap rent in a good location, and she didn't want to move out to a bigger place, nor did she want my coworker to move in with her or be in her space. They got divorced 3 months after, and coworker is now married again. Story 89. I'm not sure of the context of this exactly, but it seems that everyone here has decided that this question means, what is the fastest you've seen someone go from initially being married to having cause for divorce? In my case, we'd been married about a year when we had an argument. I tried to get her to leave so we could calm down, and in my attempt to talk to her about this, she hit me. 5 minutes before she had been repeatedly smacking me on the forehead while yelling. I was like, there is the line. I literally walked out and drove right to a monastery. I sometimes think I should have stayed there. We legally divorced some months later. Story 90. My uncle was married about a month or 2 ago. His wife was really nice, and my whole side of the family expected the two to be married for years at least. A week after the marriage, a single look from him had reminded her of an ex who had abused her. She got scared, and the two quickly got divorced. Story 91. Bride was giving a blowjob to one of the groomsmen the day before her wedding, found out later. The bride and the groom get married. Groom didn't know. Are married for about a month before the bride and the groomsman she was blowing run off to a different city to be together. Bride and groom get divorced. Groom is my friend still. The bride and her now boyfriend are not. Story 92. Went to a wedding in CO. Groom was cheating a week before, was unfaithful during the bachelor party, and the day after the wedding. The family spent something like $10K on it, and the couple placed themselves in another $20K in debt for the wedding on top of $200K for a house. Divorce a week later. Story 93. 2 sons. A friend of mine and his fiancée took ballroom dancing lessons before their lessons. His fiancée fell in love with the instructor and had an affair. Not sure if it started before or after the wedding. They divorced after 2 months. Her relationship with the dance instructor lasted 3 months post-divorce when he moved on to someone else. My friend is now happily married to someone else. Story 94. Father was the southern town's biggest pastor. Found son on Grindr. Found a nice girl for him at a worship party at the pastor house. Dated for 3 months before the wedding. Only thing they both had in common was they both liked sucking male body part. Divorce occurred 2 months later. Story 95. My uncle married a Russian woman he met at a hotel on our trip to Egypt. They married a year later, actually, in Russia. But my uncle came back to Canada and started preparing things for her to come to Canada. 9 months after their wedding, they got divorced because she started saying things like how Canada was terrible and that we were evil and blah, blah. That's the fastest they've seen wedding to divorce happen. Story 96. My uncle took a year for them to get engaged and a year for them to divorce, if that. My uncle is a nice guy. His first marriage didn't end well. He wanted a family. Along comes this leech within the fire department half his age. They ended up falling for each other and they got engaged fast. Well, they were supposed to have the wedding real fast like the next year, but ended up cutting that in half and getting married in the court by themselves sooner. This girl was sketched the whole time. She had 2 past husbands, 3 children, and I guess she was getting alimony or something, even though she didn't have even practical custody over any of them. The one vacation we went on, she basically kidnapped her oldest son for because her father demanded he stay and go to football camp, but she took him on the trip without having legal custody. On top of that, her other 2 kids were brats, and she was super entitled about anyone talking to them about their behavior. One punched my brother and he pushed him into a sand dune to not hurt him, but retaliate, and she yelled at my brother for shoving her kid because he was defenseless. Meanwhile, severely mistreating my cousin, the uncle's son, by trying to control everything he did and not allowing him on electronics or to go out with us. That was the only vacation she went on with us. My uncle ended up paying all her bills, helping her pay for her kids, any support she needed. He gave her even though she was plenty supported already. After he had his name on all of her stuff, he found her phone, littered with messages and pictures of NSFW things. Turns out this thought was banging the entire fire department, having threesomes, the whole shebang. No one in the department bothered to confront my uncle, even though this has been happening like a month or two into the marriage. Even though they were married less than a year, he still got stuck with her bills for a while, having to take her to court and fight everything. She got him for alimony too, I think. He may have had to stop paying her though. Luckily, he found a nice older woman who is super sweet. She acts so much better and more thoughtful, wanting to help and spend time with the family. She has already had her kids move out, but she is super nice and caring towards my little cousin and helps keep my uncle organized. They aren't even married and everyone already calls her aunt. Happy ending to a trashy story. Story 97. Knew a chick when I was at Dinfos. Had already been married and divorced once to a guy she met on deployment. Then got married to a guy while at Dinfos. Then got divorced from that guy. Ended up marrying another dude and had a kid with him. I don't know if they're still married because all her posts are her and her kid. And honestly, I don't really care. It was just really funny when she went from happily married to happily single to happily married, all in a span of about 9 months. Edit, chick, not check. Story 98, my marriage. 4 months later, he announced he fell in love with another woman, leaving me with our 2-year-old daughter. Had to sell my brother's house, which we bought after he died 2 years before. Even 9 years later, will never forgive him to have forced me to let go the most wonderful thing I could have had from my brother's memory. Story 99. 3 weeks, he started a fight with her the day of the wedding, accusing her of cheating with the person who was giving her away at the wedding. Turns out he had gotten his side piece knocked up and was hoping the wife would take the fight as a sign she should cancel the wedding. Story 100. When I was about 13, I saw my friend's aunt meet a guy, get engaged, get married, and then divorced all within 2 months. She got engaged the same weekend she met this guy, who happened to be the neighbor of my friend's other aunt. The other aunt was trying to set them up, but they took it to a whole